Hello, everybody. I'm glad we're here today. We're going to start talking about delivery and shipping of features. Let me introduce myself, and then we'll go counterclockwise or clockwise in introductions. I'm Dathan Padishal. I'm a principal engineer here at Plato, and I'll hand it off to Shadi.
Good morning, everybody. Very excited to be here. I'm Shadi Rostami. I'm SVP of engineering here at Amplitude. Our mission at Amplitude is help companies build better product, and we do that by offering the best-in-class digital analytics platform that gives our customers a self-serve view of their customer journey. And prior to Amplitude Networks, I joined Palo Alto when we were a very small company, 30, 40 people, stayed there for 11 years, and left when the company was about 8,000. I'm actually originally from Iran. I was born and raised in Iran. I went to undergraduate there, and then I went to Vancouver, Canada to do my Ph.D. After graduation, I was debating whether I want to stay in academia or go to industry. Things, so I'm gonna go to industry, and I like to build things, but I cannot use my hands very well. So fortunately, I can build software, and I'm very, very passionate about building software and excited to be here today and chatting with you about some of these things. Then back to you, Chris.
Hey everybody, I'm Chris Slowe. I'm the CTO at Reddit, and as you all know, Reddit is a place where you've wasted probably a ton of time, and for that I apologize, but hopefully you've left it knowing something more than you did or had some enjoyment. Been at Reddit for 12 out of 17 years. It's actually funny to say Reddit's been around for 17 years. Nobody's made it the whole way through. I was actually also the first employee, so I've seen the company kind of all different stages, did some startups in the meantime. I also have an academic background. In my case, I was actually doing experimental physics. So I am not a classically trained computer scientist, which does wonders for the imposter syndrome that I already have. And originally from Boston, which is where actually Reddit got its start. Reddit was one of the first YCombinator batches back in summer of 2005, for those of you who don't know the history.
All right, let's jump right into it. So in recent years, the focus primarily for our industry has shifted from the outputs of what we build to the business outcomes generated by those outputs. Is this something that you witness in your organization? Do you think it makes sense? If it does make sense, does it make sense for all organizations regardless of stage and size?
Yes, I can answer that. I 100% agree. And I think it's so important that we move from shipping to actually solving customer pain and changing customer behavior and improving business outcome. This is a very important journey that needs to be happening. And I think it starts with the culture. I think you have to have the right culture in the company. One of the things that is very, close and dear to my heart, and it's very important for us at Amplitude, one of our principles in engineering is that engineers basically own the product experience. Engineers own that. It's not just that, I'm going to go build something that I'm told to build and I'm going to deliver up to the spec and I don't care about everything else. No, I own the entire journey and I basically make sure that it's successful. And I think if you don't have that mindset, you might be just shipping a lot of cool feature that doesn't solve anybody's pain and it's not really valuable and it doesn't improve the business. But if you have that mindset, you definitely ship cool features but you ship cool features that are actually solving customer pain, and that's what is very, very important. The first step is and how to ship it, but it needs to go beyond that to be successful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that as we've gotten better at engineering practices over the years, and there's been more and more documentation, more and more books. I mean, you can't go to Amazon without tripping over another book on how to do better, software management or management in general. The emphasis on execution is, to some extent, I worry that we put so much into that we're just mashing tickets as opposed to actually solving user problems. Because it's very easy to get into that groove where it's you set up engineers to basically have some sort of either, whether it's agile or Kanban, doesn't really matter. They're going to be consuming tickets and generating output. And, everyone's busy, and it's very easy to get to the point where you're just kind of solving the actual statement of the ticket without thinking about the fact that you're impacting real users in the process. I mean, I think in our case, our engineers ship features that millions of people see, and it's very easy to kind of get a little complacent that, that's kind of not a big deal, when it's actually like you're really affecting somebody's user experience. I also think from a strategy side, the importance of strategy is to provide orientation for all of these projects. And otherwise, you end up in this state. I have a senior director who likes to describe it as rowing around rowboat, where it's like, if you're just going to be executing and you're just moving forward in the direction that seems to be right, well, everyone's just rowing in a random direction, and so the boat doesn't actually move. So you're all working really hard, and like you're generating a whole bunch of output, and then you find out that the metrics don't move, and then it's like, well, what happened? It's like, well, we didn't actually have a strategy we're following; we were just kind of building. And so making sure there's a balance there of sometimes it's okay to deliberately slow down as long as you have a chance to focus.
There's one thing that you guys mentioned that I'm really focusing on. It's about how your developers get closer to the actual customers when presented by someone in between. So, say for instance, a product is typically close to the customer statement. How do you get engineers closer?
Yeah, I think one thing that people tell me that I said this is not. Sometimes people say that product managers think about what and why, and engineer thinks about how. I said no. We all think about what and why and how we're building that. Of course, people have different area of focus and different expertise, but it's important that we all own that. So one of the things that is important for us, and we try to do it at Amplitude, we say basically every engineer have to meet a customer once a week or listen to a call. Of course, we are a B2B company. It will be definitely different in Reddit because it's a B2C company. But at the B2B company, we have customers that our engineers are getting to that. And why are they getting on the call is to understand what is the actual problem that the customer are facing, to get that feeling of the raw data. They always get the compiled data from the PM, but it's important to get that raw data of how customers are experiencing and what are the pain they have, and so on and so forth. And in a build, and as they're building software, engineers make tons of trade-offs. They make decisions. So it's important to have that, and it's very, very valuable to have that perspective. But one thing that is important, we do that qualitative data is very, very valuable, but it's not only qualitative data. You need to have quantitative data too, because you don't want to just build for one customer. You're building software for a number of customers. So it's important to use actually data. You're an analytics company. We eat our own dog food, or people say drink your own champagne, use a better terminology. But we try to basically, one of our goal is that measure the outcome, have quantitative data of how people are using that. So for example, we have a team that is focused on collaboration, because we believe that analytics is a team sport, and our customer needs to basically collaborate to make data-driven decision. It's important that we improve that. So we have a metric, which is a weekly collaborative users. That team, that as they talk with customer and they realize, customer wants integration with Slack, for example. So they get that feedback and how they think about using it. But when they develop it, then they go back and see whether actually that feature that they release actually move the metrics, or do we have more weekly collaborative user across our customer base? And if they do, that's great. If not, let's go back to the drawing board and see what else can we do to basically solve that.
I totally agree on the side of the importance of product here, insofar as it's kind of funny to think about the fact that we do need to have somebody whose job it is to think about the user in this whole experience, right? I mean, and ultimately that's where the product fits in, right? Like their job is to effectively manage all of the stakeholders on a project, which includes the users and everything else. But I also agree that it can't just be product advocating for it, because engineers do have a lot of power in this mix, right? They're the ones who are actually shipping the experience and building and deciding on what trade-offs are appropriate given the scope of the project. I think one of the things that's fun and difficult at Reddit, and as Shadi mentioned, we are a B2C platform. In fact, one of my oldest jokes is that Reddit primarily exists as a platform to criticize Reddit. If you're going to actually, whatever we do, we have a whole bunch of users telling us that we did something really stupid, or that they, some other group saying we loved it, or then they'll subsequently tell us that we were stupid by shutting it down in the first place. So you can't please anybody. The issue that kind of comes up is that oftentimes, those of us who work here also tend to be more core Reddit users. And so by trying to solve our own problems, it's important to keep in mind that there are a variety of different user archetypes across the platform. And some of them are more casual and some of them are more core. And if we're going to spend our time only on solving our own problems and making sure core users are happy, or, enhance the core user toolkit, we're not thinking about the next 10 million users that we want to get on the platform. That's a case where those users are necessarily going to be a lot more silent, right? Anybody who's actually complaining or telling you live on the platform, like you did a thing that they didn't like, you're already so far down the funnel for users who are posting and making those comments that you're really, it's a lot of noise from a small group. And it's hard to remember that when that small group is still several thousand people. You're missing the other millions that are kind of hanging around. And so in our case, the importance there is not just talking to the customer, but also making sure we have teams dedicated to more systematic discussions with customers. So, user research is becoming increasingly important with time, because we do really need to go out and kind of tap users who aren't going to be vocal otherwise. And then making sure to mix that with data science and insights, right? So kind of get a combination of the quantitative and the qualitative to know that we're doing the right thing. And then to be able to feed that back into the engineering and product teams to make the right calls is where the magic kind of happens. And I wouldn't say, we just don't have it right yet, but we're getting better at it with time.
This really touches on, a commonality between a B2B site and a B2C site. It sounds very similar. What sort of advice do you have for a company that doesn't have a very close relationship of engineering to the customer? What sort of metrics would you recommend that they should pay attention to? And what is your definition of done in respect to the customer, and how the engineering team should handle that done?
That's a very, very good question. And I think one thing that we say, of course, this is not true for all of our pieces of our software, but a lot of customer-facing pieces that we are developing, it has to be iterative. You have to basically, we have a say, we say that you're building, you're not, if you want to build a car, don't try to build the car on the first round. Try to build a skateboard, then build a scooter, then build a bike, and then build a motorbike, and eventually build a car. Why you're doing that, going through this iteration, is because the sooner you put something in front of customer, the sooner you can get feedback of how users are using it. You can always talk beforehand and talk hypothetical about whether they're going to like if you do something like that or not. But the best way to get whether they're going to like it or not is actually let them play with it and, have a product out there. So, that is not correct that's not true for our infrastructure pieces. Our infrastructure pieces are different. But if it's a customer face, piece, you might say, okay, maybe scaling is not the most important thing right now. We're early on, we're building a skateboard. Let's put it out and see if the customers are actually like it, or is it going to be, being taken by them. You put it out there. If it's successful, that's great. Then we have to make sure that we build the next iteration of that, whether some things or eventually, helping the scale and so on and so forth. But if it's not successful and it's not, then you might decide to kill it, or you might decide, okay, why is it not successful? So going through that iteration and getting that, customer data back and see how customers are adopting or not adopting it, it's the most important that can help you drive in that path of deciding, is it the right thing that I'm building and how am I building? And with that mind, that it's never done. The software is a living organization. It's constantly improving and getting better. But the important thing is that you're intentional, that why am I doing this? Right now, I'm putting the first version out there to basically mainly get feedback. So this is that stage. Or right now, I'm basically doing scaling work so that I can scale my existing thing that have already seen the traction. That's the way that we do it at Amplitude.
Sorry, everybody, for the phone call faux pas. That's the problem of doing this on a laptop where my phone silencing doesn't actually respect it. I say definitely agree on all fronts there. I think the one thing that the one addition I'd add into is that iteration gets you to a large extent to what customers need, but sometimes what a customer needs is going to be more drastic than what they expect, or it's almost like separating out need from want is one of the difficulties in making decisions for what to build. I from experience on the B2B side, I know that can be extremely difficult because, honestly, when you get to the point where a product becomes successful, all of your customers start wanting different things, and they're all very loud because they talk to you directly. On the direct B2C side, it's a combination of like, users yell for things that they don't want, and they also yell at things that they don't want you to have added that you've already added. And so, to some extent, the iteration, beyond iteration, requires some conviction, right? Because you need to every once in a while make a change that it's going to be hard to get in some cases from a skateboard to an internal combustion engine. Right from scratch. You can probably work your way up there, but it can be difficult. Sometimes you really believe you need to have that engine. That's going to require a bunch of upfront decisions, a bunch of upfront investment. And that means when you actually launch it, it's also not going to be an optimum experience because, as we've gotten really good at doing A/B testing as a culture, it means that moving off into the field of possible experiences, you're necessarily moving away from a local optimum. And so you have to almost have some conviction that walking into that forest there's a path in there somewhere. We just have to be able to find it and actually get to it. And then you can get back to iterating and kind of optimizing. I think that the struggle there, and something that we encounter a lot, is really making the call too between, when do you stick to your guns and say, we're going to find it, versus when do you say like, yep, this isn't going to do it. We're done. We should really stop. And all I can say for the second one is like, man, sunk cost fallacy is a real thing, right? Like once you kind of like put some commitment in, you start living off the land, and you're like, we really believe it's going to work, and your metrics are flat, and you're just waiting for that takeoff. True for a startup, it's true for a company at large scale as well. And so that's where, again, we're like really have to listen to user research on this case, where you have to talk to users and say like, are you solving anybody's problems? Because the last point on this one would be that for any feature that you build, there's probably going to be some there's some group of users for which that's like magical and perfect. And if that user base is really small, it can be really painful to decide to like cut it later, because there is going to be a cost in maintaining that stack. And you have to really decide like, if you've got 100 users using it and 200,000 that aren't, it gets to be a little tricky to decide if that's the right thing you want to prioritize.
Awesome. Now, this is more along the lines of the question of answering the why for engineers and motivating them. And then in the last 10 years, we've had phenomenal growth in our industry. But what about now in today's a trying time? How do you keep your team motivated and focused on building the feature or improvement in question?
I think the engineers get motivated because they want to build something that is being used by people. They want to say, what is the impact of my work? What if I'm going and fixing these tickets or building this thing? What is the impact of that on my customer, and what is the impact of that in the success of the business? So I think engineers think about both ways, and I think it's very, very important. So one thing that I always believe is that if engineers actually see that how they are solving customer pain, that gives them a good motivation, that there is a reason I'm doing that. I enable that company or that person to do something like that. That's what I said, when I decided I don't want to stay in academia, is because, academia, the time to what you're researching to actually seeing an impact is much longer. In industry, you do it, you see it, and you get that gratification or that, okay, people are using it. So one thing that, that we do is that, if you're building for customer facing features, if you're planning to build something, you have to have a customer development partner. people who are gonna be with you. They're kind of part of your journey. You validate things, but also you get a good feedback that somebody really cares about what I'm building. So I'm not building something in silo. That gives that motivation, that excitement, that I'm really moving the needle. And then you also look back at your metrics. You define your North Star. North Star is something that shows that how customer are getting the value, and then you see that you're moving those North Star. These are all ways that you can see I'm actually contribute to the success of the business. I solve customer pain and I'm contributing to the success of business. That can be really, energizing, I think, for engineers.
I totally agree. And actually, let me. I couldn't sum it up better. So let me try to answer the flip side of that coin, which I've seen before, which is that the flip side of that coin is I've often seen that sometimes engineers can associate too much with their code. And what I mean by that is they have a lot of ownership. Like writing software is like, it is a creative act in a lot of ways. Like there's a lot of math in it, but at the end of the day, it is about kind of pouring yourself into. I usually describe it as trying to convince a computer that I am correct. And so there's a lot of time and energy that goes into that. And so when you get to the point of trying to decide to also sunset a project, that's when things can get very dicey, because now you've got a bunch of people who are kind of emotionally invested in an experience. Like you spend a bunch of time up front saying like, this will move the business forward. And then, 3 or 4 months later, it's like, it's not moving the business forward enough. And now you have to go through and do the teardown. And that can be kind of painful, right? And so there's a really good, very old video by Steve Jobs from I think it was the either mid-90s, where it's about how strategy is about saying no. Right, and he's actually in this old grainy video. He's legitimately dealing with somebody from the audience who has a question about a project that he himself killed, and he has to basically he doesn't apologize for it. Like he basically says that it was a bad idea, but of course he's got this revolting group of engineers who have sunk all this energy into a project. I think it was OpenDoc at the time, and he has a really good answer about how you got to move the business forward, and sometimes strategy is about saying no. It's not about saying yes to everything.
And that really talks about coaching or convincing engineers when it's okay to throw things away. What is your go-to sort of metric for that, or argument? As I know you put a lot of time into this. It was very well appreciated. It's just not right for right now. How do you convince the engineer that the time was not lost?
I can take a first stab at that. I think that it's about first letting them know that there will always be more projects. Right? This is that was a project. It didn't work out. There's a certain maturity in accepting it didn't work out, and then the hard part for us, and where I'm actually putting a lot of work right now, is to do the actual cutting part, like the actual removal of the code, like sunset. Because oftentimes what we do instead is we kind of park a project. We kind of say well, maybe somebody will find this interesting later. You kind of park it to the side. And the issue with that is it belies the fact that those little nuggets of code, those little services you built off to the side that maybe tens or hundreds of users are using, are an embodiment of technical debt in the future, right? Because they're going to sit there parked, and they'll have a small bug load, and somebody has to deal with those bugs, and it's probably the same development team. And the entire user experience is going to move along and evolve, and it's going to create more bugs because now you've got this stack that's kind of out of date and out of the way. And so, really, it started, in fact, for us recently, really coming to a head where you start looking at composition of what our team's actually working on. And the load of those little side projects, those little projects that we kind of we sunset. We didn't really kill. We just kind of parked them over to the side, and we said it's not worth killing yet. And you're gonna put it over there. It has an actual material impact on the productivity of the engineering team, right? Or you have you discover that there's been a lot of recent fun and exciting security patch incidents. If you recall, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, there was a Log4j patch issue, which was a major thing for most orgs to have to deal with, right? Well, now you have to deal with is that thing we parked a year ago using Log4j in some obscure way? Crap. And so you've got there's ways for it to manifest, and it starts to really bring it to a head. And so what I'm actually trying to do right now more than anything else is to emphasize the let's do that exercise a little earlier in the game before it starts to become a burdensome thing, and show the engineering teams that that's actually worthwhile. And it's actually, for the most part, sticking. There's hunger to do it if you actually tell people that, like, the best way to get a green field in a modern code base is to clear the forest, right? So you got to go through and find those forests you need to clear out.
Yeah, I think Chris has a very good point. It's very, very difficult to kill a project because you're emotionally attached. There's sunken cost fallacy. There's a lot of things that get into that. But when you make that call, again, you have to be really brave and you have to really that conviction. But when you make that call, I think when you go back to that time, it's not totally wasted because you learned so much through that process. You learn that, why did this didn't work, or this was not a great idea, or, it didn't move the needle right now, or it was too early for its time and the users are not ready for something. There's a lot of learning. If you focus actually on the learning, so as you're doing, one of my favorite things, always doing a retro, as you're learning and what did we learn from that can be a very important outcome. It's not only about the software, it's just about the learning, that learning can help you build the next one that is going to be very successful. I think that's the important thing. And I'm right now not coding, but when I used to be very technical and coded a lot, and I love debugging. I really, one of my passions was just debugging. And in debugging, you can be very stressed out, but you're going and sometimes you're just eliminating things that might be the root cause. And you're spending time, but okay, I know that this is not the problem, so I'm focusing on something else. It's the same concept. I know that this path didn't take off. Now I'm going to try to see if there's another path that I can go and try and move that needle or move that metric that is important for the business.
Awesome. I think we have a little bit time for one last question, and it's a big one. Tech debt versus a business outcome move. At what point are you advocating for a tech debt focus versus making a A/B test or another sort of business outcome hypothesis?
I think it's a very, very important and hard question, that how to find that balance. I can go on and talk about it, but really you can see in practice, and it's a very difficult one. And you have to create the space that, actually, that's why it's important that you have engineer and product manager. They are going and they're challenging each other and they're bringing things to each other. So it's very important. That's why we believe in two in a box, because it's not just that engineers are building what product managers. So they're coming and saying, okay, we need to do this feature. Also, we need to improve this part of the system because I would not be able to maintain this thing because there's major tech debt. The important thing is that, I don't know, somebody once told me that now you finish all of your tech debt and everything is going to be good. I said, no, we finish the tech debt and then we create new tech debts. So it's going to be an ongoing. It's not going to end, right? But it's very important that as we're going through stages, we think about, what are the things that we are solving and create that balance. So there should be items in our roadmap that are engineering driven items, and there's items that are customer facing or product driven items. So that collaboration and that challenge can give you to the right balance. And it's very important that we do both of them.
Yeah, I usually describe it to teams as, like, especially to new engineering managers, is that the roadmap has to be a balance between the product roadmap and the engineering roadmap. And you need both elements because both of them move the business forward differently. I think there's also a tendency, at least in orgs that I've been in, to treat tech debt as this kind of like somewhat behind the scenes thing that you kind of work on. Like, it's almost like backlog grooming, when in actuality, I think at times it does have to be treated as like a first class priority for the company, or at least for that part of the business. And so I think this is a place where, we as leaders have to be able to advocate to our bosses and to our teams to say, like, well, I know you really want to ship this feature or you want to move this product forward, but we really need to re-architect X, or we really need to build out this toolkit. Because right now, like, if we don't do that now, like, we'll delay this project, but I can guarantee you later that we'll get projects done faster if we do this. And that's usually a fairly straightforward trade-off to make. as long as it can be, as long as we don't do the engineering thing, which is turning that little tech debt, rebuild into a second system. In which case, it's, I personally don't believe in engineering timelines that are longer than a quarter. It's like, if there's no PM involved, no, it's not. You're not going to rebuild the entire iOS app in 90 days. It's not actually possible.
Well, this is fantastic. Thank you so much, Shadi and Chris. Here are some of the things I'm taking away from our discussion. Getting features in front of customers, engineering, hearing from customers directly, sizing of a shipment, not just through tickets or boards, you're building for someone. And then finally, tech debt is a first-class citizen and should be part of the engineering roadmap along with product or customer features. Anything else that you guys want to state before we go?
This was a whole lot of fun, and thanks for having us here, Plato.
This was awesome. Thanks so much. It was great.